Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with a philosophical discussion on the aesthetic elevation of trivia. Trivia as the highest goal of performance practice. Yes, because that is what the period instrument people are doing recently in promulgating original instrument performances of Mahler, the late Romantics, Elgar. I mean, all of these people. It's an absurdity, an absolute absurdity what these people are doing. And what they're trying to do, remember, let's be clear about a few things. Let's start at the beginning. The period instrument movement got going, playing early music, according to certain aesthetic criteria that they had allegedly researched, some of them better than others, but they had some research, and they applied this to the performance of earlier music using reproductions of instruments at the time with the attempt at trying to recreate what those things might have sounded like back in the day. Now, we all know that that was wholly speculative. Some of the things, yes, I mean, they had a basis, but that doesn't mean that things sounded like that because the instruments got played by modern musicians with modern aesthetic, sort of training. And we know pretty well by now that their preference for lickety-split tempos and strings with no vibrato and all that stuff, it's all just wrong. Completely wrong. But we liked the way it sounded because it was different. And because it sounded different, we accepted it. And if you take the authenticity aspect of it and just trash it, which is where it belongs, what you have is a different interpretive set of parameters for earlier music. Well and good. They won that argument. Everybody's doing it now. And the interesting thing about it is that a lot of the things that they did, I mean, anybody can do. You can play things faster. You can leave out string vibrato. You can have timpani with hard sticks. You can change the balances within the ensemble. None of that's difficult. None of it. And it all works. It works fine. So people are doing it, then that's fine. It allows us to have a fresh listen to some very, very familiar music. And great performances will always be great performances within those parameters. But when you get to music written at the end of the 19th century, when modern symphony orchestras existed, playing on instruments which are virtually identical, something rang, virtually identical to their most modern aspects, their most modern. It's all a question of, let me put it to you this way. Let's make a comparison, shall we? This is sriracha sauce. I love sriracha sauce. Don't you love sriracha sauce? This is the most popular brand. This is your modern sriracha sauce. It is made by Hoi Fong Foods, and it's really quite tasty. And it contains chili, sugar, salt, garlic, vinegar, acetic acid, and some preservatives and xanthan gum, which makes it more fluid. It's all perfectly fine. Little preservatives. That means you don't have to refrigerate it, which is a very good thing. It won't spoil. And I'm all for that. You can leave it out. This is sriracha sauce, sriracha panic. This is your authentic performance version of the more popular sriracha. Now, this one contains chilies, water, sugar, garlic, salt, and vinegar. All the same ingredients. The proportions are slightly different, possibly. And this contains no preservatives. However, it must be refrigerated. In other words, it's going to spoil. Quite tasty, by the way. It comes from Thailand. It's where the stuff was invented. I get it. This is supposed to be the authentic version. This is supposed to be the slightly more modernized version. They are 99.9% identical, and they have slightly different qualities in terms of taste and texture. Very, very slight. But they're basically the same thing, right? So you could make a big deal out of the fact that this contains no preservatives and therefore it needs to be refrigerated, and this does not. But the differences are trivial. And you can enjoy both if you like sriracha. I mean, it's not even worth thinking about twice. It really isn't. So, what happens with period instrument performances of Mahler? Well, the most recent one I saw with the Mahler Academy, or whatever that thing was, on Alpha, and then there's The Dream of Gerontius with McCreesh. They talk about using the actual instruments, and Les Siècles does this too, Francois Xavier Roth's, organization, which may be in trouble since his scandals doing sexual texting things and whatnot. But anyway, that's a whole other issue, which we talked about in another video. So the bottom line is these ensembles try and have replicas of instruments which were made around the first decades of the 20th century. Now, the differences between those instruments and today's instruments are the differences in the two types of sriracha. They are negligible. They are trivial. They are ridiculous. They make no difference at all. It's really stupid to even think about them. But that's what they do. I mean, that's really what they've done. And as a result of that, they claim to be better, more authentic and all that stuff. And of course, they play without vibrato and do things that might have been, but really weren't appropriate to music written 200 years earlier. We'll talk about that in a second too. But the bottom line is they're elevating trivial differences to ridiculous aesthetic significance in terms of how these things work. And we all know, the basic point. I remember with the McCreesh Dream of Gerontius, I think it was, they talked about they actually acquired Leon Goosen's oboe because he played in it and he had this oboe and whatever. Who cares? It's an oboe. It's built like any other oboe. It's like getting two different brands of the same thing. The Vienna Philharmonic uses their famous Viennese horns and rotary valve trumpets. And, you can buy rotary valve brand trumpet and Vienna horn and play it anywhere and learn how to play it, and you play it. They exist. Different types from different manufacturers have minor differences. What matters is not the kind of instrument. What matters is who's playing it and how it's played. Leon Goosen's oboe was wonderful because it was played by Leon Goosens, and he spent his whole lifetime learning how to master his oboe. So what do you think is going to happen when they find his oboe and they give it to some schlub and pickup musician and they say, okay, here's Leon's oboe. Get used to it, and we're going to make a recording in 2 weeks, and you're going to play Leon's oboe. Are we going to get Leon Goosens playing his oboe? Of course not. We're going to get some schlub trying to play an instrument that he's not terribly familiar with, probably wasn't trained on, and he may do very well. He may hit all the notes. It may be just fine. But is he a great oboist? That's what matters. What matters is the quality of the musician, not the instruments that they have to play. I once had a talk with, it was Vladimir Valak, I believe, when he came with the Czech Philharmonic and they were doing Dvorak's Seventh Symphony. And I've mentioned this before. And I said to him, what is it that makes the Czech Philharmonic's wind section so marvelous? They sound so beautiful. And now they're starting to sound, they say, in recent days, more like the other orchestras. Not that the section isn't great, but their timbre isn't quite as distinctive. He said, oh, well, we couldn't buy reeds. We had no access to good quality reeds. So they had to do it their own way, and they learned how to do it. And that created a certain amount of character that was special, but it was special because of the people playing the instruments. They learned how to play them. They learned how to make it beautiful and wonderful and distinctive. Do you actually think the Mahler Academy pickup ensemble playing a bunch of instruments that they managed to scrabble together from various sources is going to give us fabulous results? Well, of course they're not. Or McCreesh with his group is going to be the equivalent of a great orchestra with an endless, like the LSO, with an endless Elgar tradition, beginning with Elgar himself? No, of course not. Their pretense to authenticity is absolutely absurd. It's absurd, and it's even more absurd when you think about the periodicity of the whole thing. Our sense of period is ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. Let me put this in perspective a little bit too. Bruno Walter died in 1963, I believe. I was born in 1961. So between my life and Bruno Walter, who was born in 1876, somewhere around there, when Mahler was around, you have not even 2 lifetimes, because I'm not dead yet, much as some people might wish for that. So it's not even 2 lifetimes. So in 1876, when Bruno Walter was born and was getting going in life, that was only, well, let's see, 47 years or so, less than 50 years after the death of Beethoven. Less than 50 years. So not even another lifetime. So let's say, be generous and say you have 3 lifetimes. If you live to be a reasonable age, say in your 80s, we are 3 lifetimes away from Beethoven. That's nothing. Absolutely nothing. Zero. Zilch. Now, I understand that there have been amazing leaps in technology, as there were amazing leaps in instrument construction and manufacture. You can now take a jet. You couldn't in Beethoven's day. You had to take a horse or something. And okay, fine. And those are fine. So people absorb the changes in technology as they go. And we've accepted those changes in technology. But what hasn't changed is the aesthetics of sound production, musical expression, emotion. I mean, what composers are trying to express in their music, whatever the technical means that they try to express it. Yes, the 20th century avant-garde sort of went off the rails and tried to change the aesthetic paradigm entirely. But if you're operating within the traditional, let's say, the traditional aesthetic of Western music, there is very, very little difference in the past 200 years. And the aesthetics really haven't changed at all. The aesthetics of expression, of writing music that is somehow an embodiment in sound of human feelings, the human condition, human emotion, all of those things. If that's what the composer is trying to do, then no matter what the technical means, the aesthetics are basically the same. You have 2 kinds of sriracha that have barely changed in hundreds and hundreds of years. So do you honestly think that by elevating these tiny, trivial differences in instrument construction and various other things, that these people are achieving something meaningful, something that is expressively meaningful? Of course they aren't. It's absolutely ridiculous. I mean, much as you love sriracha, 2 srirachas are going to be very much the same. And if you want something different, the difference is going to come not from the ingredients so much, but from the way that they're used, the creativity involved in putting the recipe together, in doing something that's different or interesting, or even taking this basic concept of hot sauce, this is your symphony orchestra, and doing something really new, as in Shaquanda's hot pepper sauce. Shaquanda is the greatest drag queen hot sauce creator, by the way. She lives in Brooklyn. Good for her. And her hot sauce, look at this stuff. Are you ready for this? This is amazingly nifty. If I can find the ingredients. Yes, onions. Oh, we didn't have onions before. Vinegar, apple cider vinegar and white vinegar, chili peppers, tomato paste. Well, that was new. Let's see what else. Demerara sugar, lemon juice, sea salt, ginger juice, horseradish, mustard powder, and turmeric. Yes! Now here is an original creation. It's an original creation that uses different ingredients to achieve a similar end. So, you might call this a great interpretation of the hot sauce concept, whereas these are 2 virtually identical interpretations of the hot sauce concept, all of which can be lovely, all of which can be marvelous if you're a hot sauce aficionado, as I am, and if you're a Mahler aficionado. But you would be totally wrong to say that because this is different from this, that this is somehow inferior or not authentic or anything. Of course it isn't. It's simply original. And originality is what we're looking for in interpretation, isn't it? We really are. I mean, much as we might love the traditional stuff, and we don't want to see this ridiculous emphasis on nonsense, on trivia, on, well, my instrument has a B flat key that's slightly oblique, and I have, violins that are strung with, different kinds of gut, and my mute is made of felt instead of plastic or metal, or my trumpet has a valve on the left and yours has one on the right, and I'm using timpani with like real dead cows covering them instead of some sort of synthetic. I mean, all of this stuff is meaningless. It's meaningless absent superb playing, imaginative, wonderful playing, and number two, a great interpretation at the helm. Something that gives us shakwanda rather than the same old, same old. You know what I mean? I want my shakwanda when I hear my Mahler. I don't want to hear just somebody who thinks that because they follow a couple rules, maybe incorrect rules, for example, such as vibrato in strings, which is totally wrong, as we know, what these people are doing. Things like that, they're going to achieve something. The performance is simply the sum of the trivial differences between instruments, and the application of certain rules. It's just anti-musical, foolish, silly, nonsensical. And I love Mahler, so I like hearing all different kinds of. I like Elgar. I want to hear all these recordings of the Dream of Gerontius. But I want the differences to mean something. I want them to be the result of an inner compulsion to realize what the music wants to express, not the result of some sort of dry academic exercise that alleges that if you put the right mechanical parts in place, you will automatically have something of value, something interesting. No, you don't. You won't. You don't. They aren't. We don't have it. It's ridiculous. And I just wanted to make the point because it's making me crazy what these people are doing, how the period instrument movement has figured out a way, which we knew it was going to do, to encroach on matters that aren't worth encroachment. There's nothing to encroach on. They're trying to create something out of nothing, and it's all financial. It's just for money. This has nothing to do with music and aesthetics. Nothing at all. So there you have it. I'm going back to my wonderful collection of fabulous designer hot sauces. And if you don't know shakwanda, I would give her a shot. I really would. It's very good stuff. There's a whole line of them. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks for joining me. Take care.